Welcome to the Time Capsule Show, where we explore the meaning of life in the 21st century through the eyes of people just like you and me. I'm Joerenz,
And I'm Joenrhuz.
and today we have patent attorney Ryan Schneer. Welcome, Ryan.
Welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Happy to have you.
Thanks so much for being on. So, could you tell us a little more about what you do? What inspired you to want to become a lawyer?
So originally I went to school to be an engineer, and as I became an engineer, I really realized that I liked learning about how technology works rather than the practical side of it as much. So as I got later on in the program, it became more about running computer simulations and running processes than it became about learning how new technology is created, learning how new technology works. And I realized that patent law was a place where I could continue to learn about what's on the cutting edge. And I never really had to work in a plant and just run the same reaction that's been discovered for 100 years and just slightly optimize it every day. It was a chance to learn about really like the people doing the really cool things all the time. And I just felt like I was never going to be bored, or I was never going to be able to stop learning as a patent attorney. Whereas if I stayed as an engineer, I would have felt like I was sort of stuck in the mundane, in the sameness. So that was really what inspired me, and it turns out to really have been the right decision. Everything I thought that it would be, it has been. Because life doesn't always work out that way, so I'm very grateful.
Awesome. So, why did you go into lobbies? I would imagine that getting a PhD in that area would also be something educational too, right? Or I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that decision was more practical. It's interesting you bring up a PhD because that was what I was deciding between. But at the time, also patent law was a little unexplored. It's become a little more popular as a career path now, I think. But it also seemed a little bit different and unique. So that was something too. And just PhD programs, they just seemed like a grueling process for something that really had no guarantee that I would get a job at the end. So there was a lot of practical aspects that went into that decision. I think if money wasn't an object and lifestyle wasn't an object, the PhD would have been the path that I pursued.
Hmm. Do you think you'll still go back for it one day?
I don't think that I would go back for a PhD now because I don't. I've as I've gotten older, I've realized that credentials are not a proxy for education and learning, and I try to learn every day. I try to get my education from the work that I do. So I don't know if I would ever go back to school from that perspective because I feel like my education so far has just been to be able to be able to have the career I want, to have the credentials and go to law school, take the bar exam, be a practicing patent attorney. And now, if I just want to learn something, we have the internet. We, you know, I can learn from people, just speaking with people who have had an expertise in that field. So I don't see why I need to go to school for something just to learn. I would only go to school if circumstances arose in my life that I would need to credential myself into another profession,
Right, right. That makes sense.
So, one thing that our listeners don't know about is that you're actually a very creative person. You've got a very creative background. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always had a side for music and arts. So I've been playing piano and singing since I was probably about 5 years old. I've written a couple of songs. I mostly play for fun as a hobby. And then also I do a lot of, I don't want to call it graphic design, but I've always had a taste for aesthetic things like designing websites or designing graphics. And I run my firm's Instagram page, and we have a lot of like silly little goofy graphics that I put on there. I actually make them on MS Paint, and it it's fun. I used to write poetry too, so and I also think being a patent attorney involves a lot of creativity because someone comes to you with an invention, and you have to structure it in a way that's very logical and organized, and that can involve a lot of creativity because things that get to me in a very messy state, and you have to make it a creative document from that. So creativity is a big part of what I do.
It's so interesting that you bring that up because I feel that when most people think about law and becoming a lawyer, they don't think about the creative aspects. People imagine it's more structured on a
Yeah,
daily.
I mean, lawyers have a reputation for being very uncreative. And I think in a lot of cases that's earned, like, one of the reasons for that is lawyers operate based on precedent. So like, judges make decisions based on what's done before. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for creativity. Creativity means you put yourself out on a limb and you're doing something that nobody's ever done before. And that's one of the things I find fascinating about being a patent attorney, because it exists in this paradoxical area of the law where, like, the law is backwards looking, it's always based on precedent and what's done before or what the legislature's intent was, or even when you're practicing in certain contexts, like, the first thing you'll do when you have to write a motion or a contract is you'll look at a template of a contract that somebody did before. So, but patent law aims to protect what's new and creative and that nobody's done before. But it's also an area of law that has all of that baggage of being backwards looking. So to exist sort of in that contradiction is sometimes interesting. And you get some interesting characters in patent law for that reason, because it think, like, myself included, I'll admit, like, I'm definitely, we range from I will say, I say this: the normal patent attorney is quirky, and the weird patent attorney is very weird. So you get some interesting people, because the skill set, that paradox, being creative yet grounded and conservative in some aspects, is usually doesn't exist in the same person. As is, like, engineering and doing science and math, and then also being able to write and read a lot and understand history. Uh, a lot of the time, most of those people that's more than one person, and as a result, the patent attorney profession is pretty idiosyncratic.
So, are patents and copyrights the same thing, or is there like a sort of a difference between those two?
So patents protect inventions, and copyrights protect works of art or authorship or music or compositions like dance. So that there are different forms of IP that cover different types of creative works.
Got it.
I see.
Have you ever dealt with an invention that was on Shark Tank yet?
No, no. And most inventions and patents are actually not filed by inventors in their garage. A lot of them are treated as assets by Fortune 500 companies.
Huh.
And a lot of the work I did before I went on my own was for companies that had very large patent portfolios, and they would sometimes file multiple patents to protect one product line, or they would file a series of patents to protect one whole area of the market. So the world of IP and patents is very diverse. There's not just one type of person getting a patent. Now that I've gone on my own, it's with more in entrepreneurs and investors, but a lot of the people I work with are in a very specific tech space. Like, they're not doing made on TV kind of stuff. So they are looking for investment, but I don't think they don't go on Shark Tank. There's investors that specialize, for example, in clean energy, like that they also have a science background, and they've entered a VC fund. And you need that, because, like, how can you evaluate an energy company if you don't understand how solar panels work, or if you don't understand how carbon capture works? Companies are just going to be taking you for a ride. They're going to give you a pitch deck. They're going to show you your pitch, and you're just going to wow them, and you're going to take them at their word. So you need to understand all of that. So the world of investing, and it goes way beyond Shark Tank. It's a very, very diverse landscape.
Wow, that's so great to know. So it's much deeper than what we see
Hmm.
on TV or just what we just
Yep.
see in general. Well, let's say you weren't pursuing law and you didn't have this science background as well. What path would you be pursuing, and why would you be doing it?
Yeah, I think we sort of touched on that, which was I'd probably gotten a PhD. So, and I would probably be in some sort of product design. I did my senior project in school on a shear thickening fluid for football helmets to help prevent CTE. So some sort of product design, either in, like, polymers or materials like alloys or something, I think would be really cool. one of the things that inspired me to be a chemie is that's what we call chem engineers. Is that we used to go to. I don't even know if you've ever been to their Hershey Park. They have the Hershey's chocolate factory where they show you how they make the chocolate.
Mhm.
And I was obsessed as a kid with that chocolate making exhibit, with how they took the milk and the sugar and the cocoa and they made it into chocolate bars. And I drove my parents nuts and have them take me on the ride multiple times. And that I love learning about how processes work like that to this day. And I think I probably would have done something similar. Like I could have seen myself in in metalworking, like where I was experimenting with different types of alloys. I've worked with some clients that make alloys for cars, and that fascinated me. Like I don't know if you've heard. I was obsessed with the show called Blown Away on Netflix. This glass blowing show, and I found it so cool how they heat glass up to 1,000 degrees and make art out of it and use glass as a medium for art. So I could have seen myself working for a company like Corning Glass who makes like fiber optic components. Or I could have seen myself working for a company like Bohr, who was a client I worked for. They make membranes. I love, and even as a kid, I had Legos and Play-Doh. Like I love seeing how you could make materials do interesting things and mix things together and get something completely new. Like just going back to the chocolate bar, like taking cocoa and milk and all this other stuff and then manipulating it to end up with a bar. I've always found that fascinating. So something I would have gotten a PhD and done something like that.
Wow, I love your ideas and I love your energy. Like you just love to create in like any aspect, and that's like I feel like that's the first thing you see when you look at something. Like how was that made? What's the process behind that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of patent attorneys, the best ones, have that childlike curiosity about everything. And I found that it's been a big asset for me when working with clients because it can be flattering if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who creates something. Whenever you create something, it comes with insecurity, like that sense of like I'm being vulnerable and putting out my ideas into the world, and it's possible that people reject it or think it's silly or laugh at me or something. So when you have somebody who comes along and not only validating your idea but is enthusiastic about it and championing it, like in a genuine way, like actually the technology's cool and this is really like to hear that from their perspective, it can feel really good. And I try to make sure that I express that natural enthusiasm when there's a really cool idea. And that's whenever I'm on a call with an inventor, whenever I see something cool, I always try to tell them that's really cool. I love how you did that, and I mean it every time I say it. And it's my favorite part of my job, seeing really smart people come up with cool solutions to problems.
Wow, that's really incredible. All right, so we're now at the segment of the show we like to call Past, Present, and Future, where we'll be exploring three different periods of your life. So, how do you see yourself now, and how does it compare to the person you were 5 years ago?
5 years ago was 2016.
Yeah.
So yeah, 5 years ago I had just moved to New York. My wife and I were doing long distance. My then girlfriend, and I hadn't proposed to her yet. Now we're married,
Oh,
and
Congratulations.
my life was very uncertain. And it's interesting. I think at the time I figured things would be more certain by now. I was at the time I was very excited to finally, and in the beginning of 2016, I was still doing long distance, and I was very worried about what would happen. Like, would I get a job in New York? Would I be able to be back with my wife? And that ended up happening. But I think I thought that, oh, my life's going to be smooth sailing from here, and that has not been the case. So I think I'm actually surprised that, in a sense, a lot has changed, but in certain things that I thought would have changed didn't. Like life is still very uncertain, and I've now sort of accepted the fact and embraced the fact that it's always going to be. And I mean, if the last year or so has taught us anything, is that there's just some things you can't predict or you can't control. So career-wise, I mean, I was still relatively inexperienced. I didn't have any experience at a law firm. I was just at the patent office, and now I'm running my own firm. So I like that advanced further than I thought. but I still have so much uncertainty. Like I don't always know where my next client's going to come from, like whether the clients are going to pay, like where my firm's even going to be. Like, am I going to be able to afford staff? Am I going to be able to? Like right now, I'm working from this. I'm working from a home office. Like, am I ever going to be able to afford an office? Like, am I going to be able to sustain my practice in 5 years? I don't know. And I think 5 years ago, that would have stressed me out way more than it does now. I've sort of learned to live in the moment a lot more and accept that there's always going to be a challenge and an uncertainty in life. And if I don't enjoy the journey now in my 30s, then life's just going to pass me by, and I'm going to wish I had enjoyed the journey. Because things are resolved when it's over, pretty much. So if you don't enjoy the struggle, if you don't enjoy the uncertainty, there's nothing. You're not going to enjoy life. So I think maybe the biggest thing that's changed is my perspective.
Oh, that's so interesting because like being 24, I've always figured that like at a certain point later on in life, things are going to be, smooth sailing. Things will be like sort of figured
Yep.
out, and it's really interesting to hear that there's some things that just really don't change.
Right, and then now I'm thinking like we're gonna have kids, and then like what's gonna happen? Like you're gonna have problems with your kids. So, but once you finally figured your own shit out, you have another little person that has literally everything that they need to figure out, like in their entire life. And I also realize as humans, we don't want everything figured out. That's boring. Humans get meaning by solving problems. It's a really interesting article I read about that, and that was the point it made, and it really resonated with me. It stuck with me. That if everything is settled in your life, then everything is boring. There's nothing to achieve. There's nothing to accomplish. So you might as well embrace the fact that there's problems and enjoy them and revel in them, and specifically revel in the satisfaction you get from solving them when they arrive.
Amen.
So that's the big. I don't think it ever. You never reach that point of like, oh, I've got everything figured out. But I think you get when you get older, you just stop caring that you're never going to have it figured out. You just accept that not knowing, not having it all together is just a part of life, and that everybody's faking it. That everybody is walking around pretending they have their shit figured out. I'm sorry, I don't know if this is
No, it's
you might
fine.
have to bleep that out. I don't know if this is a PG podcast, but
It's
everybody's walking around like they have it all figured out, but inside everybody
Right.
feels the same. So
It's so important that you mentioned that because I always wondered, like, life is like climbing up a mountain. It's always about the journey, right? But when you get to the top of the mountain, like, you look at the view, but how long do you really need to enjoy the view? Like, what's next after you reach the top of the mountain? And you're right, life does kind of get boring without the problems and without all the stresses and the worries.
yeah, exactly. And then people find another mountain. There's a term that startup founders. I heard about this in another podcast about the startup founders after they sell their company get really depressed,
Wow.
and it's apparently a documented phenomenon in Silicon Valley, and that's why people become serial entrepreneurs. You think, and the whole American dream that we're sold is that you make this money, build a business, you cash out, and then you go to the beach and retire. And well, it turns out that the type of person who starts a company is not the type of person that wants to sit on the beach for the next 40, 50 years of their lives. So they get really depressed. They don't know what their purpose is. They have all this money, but like they're not really consumers. Like they spent their days working long hours solving a problem for a tech company. They didn't, they spend money to, when they went out with their friends and they or their teams and they de-stressed. Sometimes they buy drinks, they buy expensive food. You go to baseball games, enjoy experiences, but they didn't spend it on fancy cars and lavish houses. That it was they used the money to enjoy life, of which work was a big part of it. So it's not a surprise when you lose all of that, your whole identity, the whole team, the whole routine of starting a company, the whole like thrill of not knowing what's going to happen, that you get sort of bummed out. So um, a lot of them just use the money and find another startup and become serial entrepreneurs because they don't want to just spend all their. They could retire and sit on the beach,
Hmm.
and but they don't want to do that.
Right. So, do you think it's BS when people say, "Oh, retire by your 40s and travel the world and lay on a beach in your 40s"?
I don't. I mean, the whole concept of work and retirement. I don't like to think about it that way. I think you should be able to make. If you can make, I think making money is separate from what you do with your day, and I think we live in a society and an economy Where for a lot of people, they have to make money to survive. So you can't even the whole idea that you can make money doing what you like is not even an option, and that's really sad. So um, I hope there's a point where we all evolve past our basic needs, and the whole idea of retirement doesn't even make sense in that paradigm. Like if we have universal basic income and people have what they need to survive from the day that they're born, then what would you do? What would you do? I mean, if money is no object, if people are not just going to sit around, people are still going to have dreams and goals and things they want to pursue. So that's why I don't like retire at 40. Like, what does retire mean? Like, does that just mean you have enough money to pursue what you always wanted to do when you couldn't do what you loved because you had to work to pay the bills and you had responsibilities? I don't know if that's retirement.
Mhm.
So that so how I mean I feel like the retire at 40 movement's a misnomer. I think it's great that people are trying to make enough money that they don't have to work to fill their base material needs and they could live their dream. I think that's where everyone should strive to do.
Well said. And I think that you answered kind of, unless you want to add more for our next question. Like, what principles do you live your life by?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say a big principle I live my life by is definitely autonomy and independence. I think that people should have the freedom to direct their own lives, to be able to create, to be able to put their ideas into the world without feeling like they're they're going to face judgment or critique. I mean, it's inevitable that you're going to, but I want to live in a world where people can feel free to create because I feel like everybody has something to offer, and I want to live in a world where people can choose their own destiny and don't feel like they have to work for somebody else or live under somebody else's thumb to be able to get their needs met because that's not like we get one life on this planet and it's a shame that so many people never get to do what they've always wanted to do with it. So that's definitely a big principle. And then just another one that just sort of goes without saying is maybe rare these days is just being compassionate and empathetic towards other people is a big value. Just being kind, putting like as doctors say, do no harm. It's astonishing how many people in this society just don't take a breath before they act. They'll act on an emotion like anger or annoyance, and they'll just say whatever comes to mind or tweet something because something's bothering them or they had a bad day. And I just wish more people took the time to think about how their actions affected others, and that like we have a choice about the energy that we want to put out into the world. We can put out bad energy, we can put out good energy, and I wish people took more responsibility for that. Like just because you have a bad day doesn't mean you need to infect everyone else with it. And I just it seems like we've entered a time in the society where it's sort of like, well, I should be able to express how I feel, but I feel like that's sort of selfish. I mean, you're allowed to feel the way you want to feel, but how you express it is a choice. So, and when it affects others, it's harmful to harm somebody else because you're feeling bad. Like then you're spreading negativity. Like it's different to say, look, I'm struggling. And can you help me? Can you like to ask for compassion? That's actually the opposite. But I think some people are so afraid to do that. I guess that they'll lash out instead because maybe that's because they feel like they don't deserve compassion, so they push people away. I don't know, but
Yeah, I agree. That's something that happens a lot in our society today. Like, not to get too political, but it's something that we've often seen, like when it comes to politics and different social issues, and even sometimes when we see people getting canceled, people are very quick to jump and start throwing hate, not trying to understand what's going on or what's even happening. It's all about like getting that hatred out there and expressing that, and somehow we somehow lose like the core essence of trying to actually figure out what's going on and how we can make things better.
it's weird. It's like people on the internet. They're sometimes don't feel like they're real people. Like, especially on Twitter, like your handle's not your name. You got a picture that's sometimes not you, or it's a meme or something. and like what you're speaking with isn't a person. They almost become tokenized or something. They become 2D,
Yeah.
and sometimes you forget that there's a person on the other screen, and that the things you're saying affects them and carries over into their daily life. It's
Mhm.
I always try to remember that. Like,
100%. And it's easier for people to say things when they're behind a screen. And you're right, they completely forget that there's humans on the other side of whatever screens that they're posting to and whatever screens they're messaging to. And it's a phenomenon, really, how easy it is for people to just be a-holes on the internet, you know?
yeah, it's and I may have done it once or twice. So
Yeah, I'm guilty of it too. I'm not.
I think we all are, and to some extent the tech companies create it. Like I've seen with the algorithms, like if you, I've seen that I've written an angry tweet at something, and then the algorithm will suggest the thing that I'm annoyed at. And this, I don't know if you've seen the Social Dilemma, but that was a documentary about this. So this is a
Oh,
real thing. Yep, this is a real thing. So, and it's all about attention. Everyone, the internet exists to get our attention. So the best way to get your attention is to make you angry. Like, it's not a cute kitten picture. Those are actually like decent at engagement, but I think they have a scene in that documentary where they did a study that they measured like what emotions get the most engagement, and there was like it was a graph, and then it was like happiness or positivity or the cute kitten pictures was like here, but then it was like anger and annoyance was through the roof. It was like 5 times the the amount of any sort of positive emotion. So people like or people pay attention to outrageous angry content.
That would make sense because I've seen like graphs online where they measure like news, like different, they sort of track the attention that different pieces of media are getting to the different outlets. And whenever there's some like national tragedy or something to be angry about in the country, that's when those ratings spike all the way up.
Yeah, well, humans have negativity bias. That's documented, and it comes from survival. So we have a pretty well developed. We've had, it's they call it our reptilian brain, but for millions of years, the like fight or flight system in our amygdala, which is actually like deep inside of our brain, and then other emotions like happiness, they're part of the limbic system, and they're more recent evolutions that evolved in mammals. So our fear system is more primal and more sophisticated. So we're sort of programmed to respond like it's a lion attacking us when we see some ridiculous outrage on the internet. Like I've tried to pay attention to the sensations that go on in my body when I read something like a tweet that makes me angry, and I feel my heart race. I get a little sweaty, like I get nervous. Like it is activating my fight or flight system.
Oh, yeah.
Some people don't have good control over that. So next thing you know, you're typing a response and you're not thinking and stopping because you're using that primitive part of your brain. It's if you're running away from a lion or fighting. Really, it's the fight part of the fight or flight response. So I think sometimes we overestimate the amount of control we have over this, which is probably why we need more regulation on the internet. I hate to say.
I agree. Yeah, it's nice that we can do so many things, but there really needs to be there needs to be ways to combat these sort of negative things, and it especially impacts like the younger generations where they grow up in a world where this is pretty much what they know. There was no world
Right,
before the internet, before social media.
right. And we did it with TV when TV came out. We had the FCC regulate the airwaves, and some people didn't like that, but it seems like we need to catch up with the internet.
Definitely. And I mean, mentioning it to like the future generations, I mean, look, let's be real here. Look, kids these days, maybe up to their 20s, the teens, they're always on TikTok and they're always on social media, scrolling,
Right.
scrolling. And like you said, that show on Netflix, I read the name of it,
Social
Social
dilemma.
Dilemma. They just keep showing you things that rile you up, things that you like or things that you may not like. And it's like you're a puppet. And they can easily control how you feel. And some people, like you said, aren't that great at controlling how they feel.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it seem like, oh, this is a new thing that like I said, TV, and then other generations before that grew up on radio. Like any new technology that becomes pervasive, humanity has to adapt to. and we are pretty adaptable. We're just in a period where we haven't adapted to it yet. And technological change is coming a lot faster, which means we do need to figure out how to adapt to these changes faster. We don't have the same, we still have the same legal systems that we had 200 years ago, but technology is evolving at an exponential pace. So it's going to be harder and harder to catch up to these trends unless we start thinking about applying technology to systems that we never thought about before, like the way our government works, like the way our laws are made. And that would be an interesting trend to watch over the next couple of years. We're starting to see finally a little bit of that. There's an area called legal tech. They're starting to talk about blockchain being applied to governance, and that's interesting because that seems to me to be the roadblock in our society. We have certain areas of our society, like your phones, your computers. We're having an enormous amount of technical change, but then we have other things like our healthcare, our education, where our government works, our environment, where we seem like we're stuck space travel. Even we're stuck 50 years in the past. It's very strange. So I would love if they stopped making new iPhones and we had better healthcare. I think that would be great. And it'd be interesting to see if we finally start seeing technology being applied to the areas of society where it needs to be applied to. I'm sorry, I think I went on a little bit of a tangent.
Oh
No,
no,
you're fine.
that's fine. Like these are such great thoughts. And so I guess just to move like a little forward, with everything that's going on in the world, with how fast technology is changing and how we're adapting to everything, we sometimes forget about the things around us. What would you say you're grateful for in your life?
I sort of touched upon this, but I'm grateful that I've chosen a career that's allowed me to at least try to control my own destiny and do what I wanted to do. Like I said, I think that's a huge luxury. I think most people spend their whole lives just trying to meet their material needs and support their family. So to even at least for a time period be able to do what I love and have that pay the bills, it, it's been a blessing. So that's one thing. I'm grateful for having friends and family who love and care about me for who I am. That I've been able to show who I really am, like my whole self to, and have them accept that. That's something that a lot of other people I think don't have as well. That there's so many people in this world who are discriminated against or judged or and suffer materially for things that they can't control. They have a disability or their race they're in a society that doesn't accept them for who their race is or their religion or something.
Mhm.
So I'm very grateful that I haven't had to live with that to a large extent, and that I've been able to be. Now, it wasn't always like this. I was bullied a lot as a kid, um, but to be able to get to a point where I was able to get love and acceptance, because some people live their whole lives being ostracized and being alone. So, it, and
You know, that's
that's
so
something I'm
great that
grateful for.
you found that acceptance and that you feel that way because I feel that many people don't.
Hmm.
So, our next question is actually very similar to the title of our show, Time Capsule. So, if you were to leave something in a time capsule for people to dig up 100 years later, what would you put in there and why?
This is the one I've been thinking about all week, and I'm struggling with.
Yeah, it's the toughest one.
I'm gonna just go off the top of my head, and I'm gonna say I would download all of my social sites, everything about me, my family, every picture I had, every piece of paper I have. I down get it on my computer, either somehow download it or upload it if it was paper, save it to my hard drive, and bury that. And it's not to be self-centered, but if we ever get to a point in time where society really goes downhill, which is always possible, just for people to see that there were people who were thriving and were happy and were loved and had friends and family and were able to live the kind of life that we live, just for people to have evidence of that. That's why I would say what I've said, because that would give people hope that we could get back there in the future. So hopefully they would never need that, and it would be like, look what these primordial humans were doing. What like what was this primitive technology they had? That's what I hope they say. But in case it's this dystopian future where this is the peak of human civilization, and it's all downhill from here. I would want them to hope that they could recover from that and humanity could bounce back to get to the point where it was. So I think that's what I would look at.
It's so true. That would, I feel like that, yeah, that would be a really good addition to a time capsule, especially because in this day and age, we have photos, we have voice recorders, videos, and so many different types of things. Like back then, we would maybe only be able to get writings or like very blurry, like black and white photos. This is the day and age where we can capture so much about a person in an era.
And I guess I would add then I would put it in some medium or package some medium with it that some future civilization could watch it and maybe learn something from it.
100%. So, Ryan, is there anything else that you'd like to tell our viewers? Any advice you have for people who maybe are feeling lost in their career paths and they're still searching for their meaning and purpose?
Um, I know it's going to sound sort of cliche, but like sometimes, like when you're looking for something, you don't notice what's right in front of you, and like that search for meaning, there's something in your life that you could be doing that gives you meaning right now. It doesn't always need to be a big thing. Like just focus on the one thing you could do in your life that gives you meaning. It could be even watching your favorite TV show that inspires you or playing your favorite video game. Just like block out all the noise and just think about what you like to do in your day to day. Don't judge it, don't shame it. And that's what gives you meaning. And if you start there, you'll start seeing things clearly. And then if you follow that, you'll be on the path to finding meaning. But I think look, people make the mistake of looking for that big thing. Like I'm gonna have the eureka moment, and I'm gonna have my life figured out. And I don't think that's what life's about. It's about finding meaning in all the little simple things. Because I think that at the end of your life, when you're looking back, that's what people miss. People miss the little things. It's always an event like I was at this like something you're out with your friends. Like, I mean, I guess my wedding was a big event, but when I think back on my wedding, I don't think of the big. Like I don't think of the buffet. I don't think of the band. I don't think of that. I think of when I was at my bachelor party with all of the friends I made through my entire life. It's that feeling of like love and connection, and it could be in the most mundane things, like just like getting a beer with a friend. Like so, I guess that's my advice. Find meaning in the little things, and stop looking for this grand meaning because it's just a rabbit hole. Meaning is right in front of you. So yeah,
That is perfect advice.
Where can people find you on social media to reach out or to follow you?
sounds good. So I am on Twitter at Schneer IP Law. I'm also on Instagram at Schneer IP Law as well, and on LinkedIn as Ryan Schneer IP Law. So
Awesome.
and on Clubhouse as Ryan Schneer.
Got it.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for being a part of our time capsule. Thank you
Thank you
to
so much for having me. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you to our viewers for watching, and please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tune in again next week to meet another amazing addition to our time capsule. We'll see you all next time.